Hello people, Range Rover heater unit. It's dusky outside, so there's not much lighting in here. Enough for me to work with. So yeah, basically heater unit. This is the front, the controls on the front here, various flaps and vents and things, big old motor on the back. I wanted to try and find out if it worked or not. So basically we've got two wires. In fact, one of the wires has come off there, off the top of the motor. I'll set the control to be on blower. And I have got somewhere here, one I found earlier, a 12 volt DC adapter from a phone or something in the past. So I should attach earth to earth. Well, at least you know it's running. Right, I think next step, take it apart and see what's going on with the bearings in that thing. So the fan assembly is now removed. There it is in its entirety. It would appear to be a fairly straightforward design. Nothing particularly horrible about it. I think what I'm going to do is lube up the bearings. This end here sits on a bearing that's right at the far end of the heater units, and that blower goes right down the middle. So I'm going to take the bearings out and see if I can get it to run a bit quieter. Then I think it's just a case of general clean up and stick it in the car. So I was having a little fiddle around with the motor, and I realised that obviously on the end of the blower bit, there's a couple of grub screws there that secure the blower onto the motor shaft. So having released that, let's see now we can get a bit of blowage action out of this. I might need to make up a little wire because that runs quite sweetly. Well, it's full 12 volt DC going to that. You can't see it, of course. Fail. Right. All I'm doing is I'm putting the terminal of the joblet onto one terminal and then earthing against it. It sounds quite pleasant. Smoke hasn't leaked out of it. So I can only assume then that it's either alignment of the big barrel thing, or it is bush. Oops, that bush there. I'm going to take that off next. The idea is that goes in there. Oh, that feels pretty tight. I reckon I've probably found the source of the problem there. Looks pretty dry too. Right. So I take the push off. Yeah, I think this is the source of the noise. That's what it looks like inside. Not the prettiest. It's got a little flush bearing in there. There's no roller or anything like that. But when it goes on, doesn't sound great, does it? So I'm going to give it a good clean up, and if I clean it up, lube it, we'll see if that helps it at all. It would appear to be quite a chunky device. I'd imagine it's probably preloaded with grease at some point. But once I cleaned it up, I can see what's going on, and then probably just a lick of paint and put it back together again. Bish bosh. How about that? Give it a little clean. Inside, I don't know if you can see that, there's a big star washer. And underneath the big star washer would appear to be some padding for lubrication. So I think what I'm probably going to do is lube it. And that might be all I need, because just cleaning it has made quite a bit of difference to its operation on here. Could be a bloody easy job then, couldn't it? It's nice and quiet now. Right, so I'm going to just lube that, and there's plenty of, I'm not going to bother taking it apart, but there's plenty of gaps here through the big star washer that's holding the central ball, and the central ball is designed to move around. Okay, and I guess it picks up its lube from there. Let me lube that. If I've got any. So if there's one bearing that's completely dried out, you can pretty much guarantee another bearing. This pad has soaked up an amazing amount of lube so far. I'm putting a 3-in-1 into it just by allowing it to soak into the fabric. There'll be a bearing, probably a couple of bearings inside the motor, so I'm going to have a quick look inside the motor. It looks, I've taken the outer housing off. This is the bit that fits on to there. I really wanted to check the bearings in here, but also the brushes. It'll be fairly straightforward. 2 nuts. I'll give it a wipe over and it comes up fairly presentably. This could be famous last words here. Let's push the pin through. There he goes. That's done that. Let's pull this one out. Just a little 5/16 nut on here. Just put all the bolts into a plastic box so I don't lose them all. Stinking cold at the moment, it's driving the fucking wall. Right, okay, so let's do what we'll do first of all, is just mark on here so we know which way is lined up. That looks like it's going to move. And this outer casing, oops, sorry, is trapped by that cable. Let's take the cable off. It's probably not been a pass since the 1970s, which for me isn't that long ago, but for some of you people will be when your grandparents lived. Aha, there goes a spring. Right, okay, that's pretty good. There's a bit of carbon crap in there. The brushes are almost completely worn out. We're going to get that spring. I'm very good at dropping fucking springs and things, I tell you. There it is. One spring. I can go in there. The spring just sits over the pin, and I think it holds the base plates into position. The good news now is I can withdraw the base plate with the brushes on it. You can see these brushes, there's probably about maybe 3 or 4 millimeters left on there. However, the rest of it in here isn't too bad. Let me push out the armature. That should come out. The trouble is I'm fighting against the magnetism. Let me just push it like that. There we go, that's done it. You're out. Right, so there's one armature. So the contact rings, grubby but serviceable. There's a bearing in the end there, exactly the same as this one that I've just lubed up. Exactly the same, so I'm going to do exactly the same with this one. And in there, you probably can't see it, there's a whole load of carbon dust from the brushes. And there's another bearing in there. So, that was worthwhile taking apart. Right, time to clean this lot up now. And I'm going to find out where I can get some brushes from. They look fairly standard. Just soldered onto the circuit board. Nothing nasty here. Very simple design actually. Right, let's move the bloody camera. You might actually see what I'm doing then. In fact, the heating unit can go on the floor. Oh, God, grief, it weighs some. Of course, it's all tangled up with everything. Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be easy. Right, heating unit can go on the floor. Ow! Right, another big lump on my bloody finger. Just disappeared into it. Right, what we're doing down here, we've got the various bits of the motor. This is just full of old carbon dust, which I'm cleaning out. It's cleaned up quite nicely. That's all right. There's all carbon dust down here. Carbon dust. Right, that's where all the brushes go to anyway. And when they start to wear out, it accelerates the amount of carbon dust and powder and crap. Right, that's looking pretty good. Quick jet of air. Sorry, I'll edit that out. just using a gunk solution degreaser just to clean up the casing, because it's got some nice stickers on it and I don't want to lose them. Oh, Smiths, look, Smiths rotation. It's got some information, a number of volts. It's made in the UK. Look at that. We used to make something here. Right, now let's have a look at this bearing. So this bearing again, it's exactly the same as the other one at the other end. All I'm doing here, 3-in-1, put the 3-in-1 into and just squirt a load of oil in there, which you can see is soaking away. I'll wipe away the excess before it all goes back together again. And I need to do the other end of the motor casing. So this is where the magnets and everything are. So again, just cleaning out the crap from in here. And a quick jet of air. There we go, that's all right. Quick wipe over. A bit of gunk. If this is all that's wrong with this heater unit, I'm going to be well chuffed. I still need to pressurise the matrix. I just make sure the matrix is going to hold some pressure, but that's something I'll do, because I don't really want to take the whole box apart, not unless I have to. I'll do that like that. I can see what's going on there. Right, I'll do that. Now let's do the same thing with this. So let's put a 3-in-1. Oops. What's happening there is the can is sticking to the magnets. Right, and then for this, all I do now is just clean up with a tiny piece of steel wool, brushing in one direction. And no, I didn't buy any of their records. Right, now I've done that, I need to blow all the bits of steel wool out. That's looking good. A little razor blade here, which is just about wide enough to go into the grooves. All I'm doing here is I'm just picking any excess carbon and shit out there, because it will render particular poles on the motor as redundant. You have to be pretty bloody careful doing this, because you don't want to damage the armature, because if you damage the armature it's probably going to be cheaper to source another motor, and I really don't want to be doing that. You can see there's quite a lot of crap coming out. I also want to be absolutely sure there's no lumps of steel wool in here. Right, a quick blast of air. Turn the compressor off in case you decide it's going to kick off. I reckon that is fit for further service. Looks clean enough anyway. So I'm happy enough with that. It's got a couple of shims on the main shaft, which I'm going to leave there because it's just going to go back pretty much the way it came apart. I'm just going to dry up some of this excess oil inside the main casing. Alright, let's drop the shaft back in. This is fun. It's the magnets want to pull it in one direction and then the other, and there it goes, it's in. Now it's making a noise because obviously I don't have the other bearing located yet. So what happens with the motor then is you put the contact plate with the brushes onto the top, and there it goes, and then I push the bolts through, which are here, one bolt, and 2 bolts. Right, so that's all in place, and then clean up the top end. Just taking the excess oil out of the cap here. Blow with the. That's good. There's certainly lube in there now. And then find my 2 lines, which I put on the motor body. Make sure I get it aligned in the right direction. There we are. And then push the motor body back together again. Now I need to get the bolts to go through as well. Ah, forgot the springs. There's 2 springs. And the reason for the springs are that it holds the points, so the carbon brushes down onto the base plate. If I'd have forgotten those, it would have been a bit embarrassing because I've had to take it all apart again. Wouldn't be the first time I've had to take something apart, just after putting it together. Right, that is going together with a satisfying parts together. Let's put the nuts on it to hold the 2 halves together, and we'll see if this motor still works, although I know I need to order brushes for it, but they're probably going to be a week or so away. Right, so got the motor back in, got the blower in there. You see it's spinning nicely, there's no play on that. Got the bearing on the end. So let's see what happens now when I connect up the lecky. Oh. I won't deny that's a bit disappointing. Lord, what have I done? Right, okay, found out what the squeaking noise was. In the end of the main drum, which you've seen already, there is a small, flexible, movable bush, and this is what the shaft sits on. And what's basically happening is, because that is dry as a witch's tit, as the thing is rotating, it is just creating a resonance. So I'm going to give this a proper old grip blast, paint it, lube that, put it back together again. While I was doing that, I was looking inside the heater box, and here's the main case of the heater box. I'm just looking at the sheer amount of crap that is inside this thing, dust and all sorts of manky beings and bits and bobs. So rather than fitting it back in the car in this state and then turning it on and filling up my nice beautifully restored interior with little bits of 40-year-old mouse crap, I decided to pull the unit apart. It's actually not that complex. It's a lot easier than the more modern Range Rover heating unit. Well, I say Range Rover, classic heating unit. I've kept the flaps relevant to each particular side, so the flaps are secured by these little top hat, not top hat, they're like top hats, but they're captive washers. They clip onto a small lip underneath the end of the shaft there. The majority are like that. I found the resistor unit, which gives the various speeds. It looks like on this device it's only 2 speeds. Probably find it's fast and off, but I double checked the resistance on that to make sure that fella still works. That's there. I found out what the pipe was that goes on the side of the heater unit. Sorry, I got myself tangled up here. That's the control module. That's the control module with all its various wires. I'm just going to hose this lot off, to be quite honest. So there is the motor. And the hose on the back there, believe it or not, is to feed cold air onto the resistor unit, which sits on the inside of the casing. How about that, eh? They must have had problems whereby these things were overheating, but that's Smiths for you. Anyway, so next step now is to clean all this lot up. I need to, all the powder and the dust was because of the foam coating that was fixed onto these various flaps. and that foam coating has just completely and utterly disintegrated. Let's just see if we can find one where there is any of it left. There's some felt on that one. That's felt. That's what there's some there. Look at this stuff. Look, you just have to touch it. It falls apart. Nasty stuff, eh? And that's the stuff I don't really want blowing around inside the car. So I've cleaned it all up. I've got the two end plates, which for some bizarre reason reminded me of some sort of Duck Vader. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Yes, Duck Vader. And there's two of them as well. Maybe this is actually we could have Mrs. Duck Vader, Mr. Duck Vader, and they could be, I don't know, shooting each other or something. Look at that. Right, so there's two end plates. They're cleaned up nicely. The inside of the casing is cleaned up quite nicely. I'm going to give it a lick of paint. But it's got all the dust and the crap out of there, which is quite good. I've got a pile of flaps over here. I'm going to need to get myself some very, very thin upholstery foam and stick it onto the faces where it was. There's also, some of these pieces have very, very thin strips of foam, some of which has got damaged, some of it is okay, so I'm going to leave those in place where applicable. The other thing I found interesting about the flaps is one of these had felt on each side, which was completely pitch black before I cleaned it in a bucket of soapy water. There you go. There was quite a lot of dirt in there, so God knows what sort of bacteria it's harbouring. God knows what sort of issues I'm going to have over the next day or two. The other thing I need to do is that's going to go through the grip blaster, and I'll paint that. It's got a bit of surface rust on it. Let's get it looking nice. Right, okay, so here's the control module here, and I'm quite pleased with this little fella, because I was wondering what these little joblets were, and I thought they were micro switches, but no, this is far cleverer than that. So when you move the switch, so this is the heater control, listen. I mean, this is the shit that Audi put bloody ECUs and speakers into their car to give you that satisfying. Again, on the bottom. Click, 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 click. And that's because of that one there. Clicking into holes on this. Why do you need an ECU to make a satisfying click noise? Oh, I don't know. And also on these switches here, so on the up and down switches. How satisfying is that? I love it. It's hilarious, really. I'm very easy to please, I am. Oh, that one's a bit stuck. There we are. So that was that, really. Anyway, I'm rambling about clicky switches. I'm going to protect this label on the front here because I want to keep that. So I'll put some tape over that before I paint, because I think that's quite a nice little period feature. And I'm just going to waft it over with the satin black. It doesn't need any... Cough was pre-existing, by the way. In fact, what I might do, if I paint the inside, then I could put the end plates on and paint the whole of the outside of the case while I'm gluing the flaps, then disassemble, install the flaps, and we're away. And I think that should just about do it then. Pretty cool though, huh? Right, so the heater refurb has become a heater restoration. I don't really see too many challenges with that. The other thing I wanted to check was the resistance on this to make sure this is working. This is the 2-speed control, which sits inside the heater box. I also recorded the position of all of these chaps, which are just press fit onto the end of the flaps. So I've recorded the position of all of those, so when I put them back together again, it should be easier. Motor we've decided is okay. There's a little joblet on the end here, which was making all the noise, I'm pretty sure of that. But that just needs to be cleaned up. Might even wire brush it rather than sandblasting it, because I don't want to get loads of grit into it and then just paint it. Silver, I reckon. What do you reckon, silver or black? Should we do a high gloss finish? Silly ass. It's rusted because it was never painted. I might put a zinc coat on it. There you go. Right, watch this space.